advice do you have to homeowners?
Practicing that preparedness. Starting the conversation now is always going to be a benefit to any association out there.
And welcome to Recovery Report Live. I'm Dan Odess, president and founder of GlobalPro, where we manage your risk to recovery. We've managed more than $1 billion in recovery for clients. And what is going on right now throughout the United States is certainly top of mind: recovery. Because this nor'eastern storms that keep rolling in and rolling out one after another is creating a tremendous stress on the resources in local areas, whether it's materials and labor. Access to areas is limited, issues going on in government with regards to response to these issues, or what even caused the problems with the rolling blackouts. A lot of things to kind of really unwrap here and unpackage for you as policyholders, making sure that you have the most relevant information you need as policyholders to protect your interest. And we created a bit of a list that I want to go through of the top things that you should be looking at as it relates to whether it's reporting your claims, documenting your claims, and some of the policy pitfalls that we most see. Unfortunately, we most see policyholders fall victim to. Some of these things that are pretty avoidable because we get a little wrapped up in emotion and we're dealing with a lot of things at the time, whether it's your family, whether it's your work. Certain expectations that you may put on yourself may cause you to do things that you otherwise would not have done, or try to rush through things. And that's not something you want to do with insurance. The last thing you want to do when it comes to dealing with your claim, dealing with the damages, is rushing. It's absolutely imperative that you take your time, slow down. And I want to stress a rule of thumb that we have here at GlobalPro. And we talk about it a lot with our policyholders. And that is, you want to make sure that you mitigate your damages, you want to stop, you want to recover the money you're entitled to, and then you want to rebuild. Unfortunately, a lot of policyholders fall victim to the idea of mitigating and rushing to actually rebuilding. And I understand the urgency when dealing with your family and trying to get back to work and trying to do all these things. You just want to put this behind you. You want to shove it aside. But unfortunately, it comes at great financial risk, particularly for business owners and community association managers and board members. Why? Because as a board member, you're a fiduciary to all of your neighbors. And as a business owner, you're a fiduciary to yourself. And quite frankly, a lot of people are dependent on your business, whether it's you and your family, as well as your employees. And you certainly don't want to do things to prejudice those recoveries. So it's important to take your time. Make sure that you mitigate, you stop, you rebuild only after you have recovered the money that you're entitled to. Because quite frankly, you don't know what you have to rebuild until you've recovered the money. And that requires your insurance company to issue you a statement of your loss, whether it be a itemized actual estimate, a copy of a check, whatever it is. It's really imperative that you obtain those records and documents, review them, issue any disputes to your insurance company. What may or may not have been included in there that should or should not have been included. And I say should and should not have been because sometimes with the volume of claims that the insurance company are experiencing, sometimes adjusters will include things they shouldn't in place of other things they should have, and those things they included were at a lesser value. And so you want to make sure that you have correct information, particularly if you're trying to engage a contractor and now you're having to spend money. And you want to make sure that there's no shortfalls in your financials that are going to put any further stress on you, either personally or your business, or you as a board member prejudice your unit owners which may result in actual special assessment. So starting out with some tips on what you can do to protect your interest. Make sure you document everything. So often we're rushing to start rebuilding, as we just mentioned, so we're not documenting things. We're not taking pictures. And we're not taking pictures here for social media. We don't want the funny, goofy angle of your kid in the middle of the room. No, we care about the specific issue that you're trying to identify in an area that you're taking a picture of, but we also need to be able to see where that photo was taken. So make sure you're taking broad angle pictures as well as close-ups. And it's a good practice and procedure to walk around and take pictures of both damaged and undamaged areas. When it comes to large multifamily properties, this task may be daunting. So it's important that you take pictures, as many as you can, walk with the insurance company, take pictures during those inspections, and then keep those for your records. They may become important down the line. You're also going to be engaging experts and other people to help you in handling your claim, which may be public adjusters or contractors or engineers. So it's important that you have all that information available to them if they need it. However, they may take them on their own. And you as an owner or operator of the property, it's a good idea to retain your photographs because you're probably going to be there before anyone else. And that's what's really important. That's who we're trying to talk to here is the policyholder. Making sure the policyholder, you are protecting your interest as a policyholder. Making sure that you take the pictures soon after the event occurred and making sure that you obtain the information that you need in order to be able to have documented your claim in a way that is sufficient to making that loss on your policy. And don't rely on your public adjuster, don't rely on your contractors, don't rely on all these other individuals to do that, but make sure that you have them for your own records because you know what that property looked like before the event occurred. And a lot of times when you have widespread damages and disasters like this from the winter storms that we're experiencing, a lot of times the response by professionals that you may retain or intend to retain at a later date are going to come into these properties after you've already started the mitigation effort. So it's going to be a very daunting task for them to be able to identify what was there, what wasn't prior to the storm. No matter how many photographs, no matter how many reports are written by experts, knowing what was there first is very important. So a lot of those experts, whether they're public adjusters and contractors, are going to be asking you about the conditions of the property before the storm occurred. So it's important that you have photographs immediately after the storm, or even if that you had pictures of the properties even before the storm to be able to provide that to them. And if they do ask you for stuff, make sure you promptly provide it to them. So let's talk about how you report a claim. A lot of people had a tendency to say things like, oh, there's minimal damage here, or there's a small amount of damage there. Let's not use so many adjectives to qualify reporting of damage. The fact is that you have damage in your property, whether it be your business or your community association or your home. Let's not mitigate the extent of the damage because you just don't know. And so by you attaching adjectives to you reporting damage, it helps the insurance company in mitigating what they may otherwise pay you. And also it is almost a qualifier as they're coming out there with a certain expectation that there is minimal damage or there's not as much in one area versus another. You don't need that because you're not the expert. So you want to be able to make sure that the insurance company is doing an independent evaluation. They're doing a fair evaluation of your damages. So there's no reason for the qualifiers. And a lot of times when we review instant reports or documentation from property managers, they insert these qualifiers as if they're somehow helping, but the reality is they don't know. And then down the road, when they discover more damage, the tendency is insurance companies to look back and say, oh, well, you saw was only an insignificant amount of damage. Now it's a lot. Maybe there was a pre-existing issue here. And then you start going down that path, and it's a path of most resistance, not least resistance. So let's keep it simple. Let's simply report that you have damage. It's important that you identify where that damage is, which units or which rooms, whatever amount of information you have. But again, it's just damage. So, and also, before I move on, make sure that you're not saying the source of that damage, that it's more about the fact that you have damage. Again, you're not the expert. So while you may have an idea of where that damage came from or what caused the damage, you just don't know at that moment. Unless you have some sort of record or you had been in that area prior to it, you don't know. So don't make assumptions about it. That's really what I'm trying to get at here, is assuming that something is either minimal or is a cause of something. Let's take the assumptions, set them aside. What do you know? What are the facts that are most relevant to you? Something related to winter storms specifically is this idea of an ice dam. And something I want to make sure that a lot of our listeners and viewers are paying attention to are these issues with regard to ice dams as we head into next week or the following weeks when the weather is intended to get warmer. What happens is that the ice won't allow the water to flow off these roofs, and it backs up and gets into properties and causes extensive damage. Pretty good idea to go up there and try to mitigate those issues, but do it safely, hire a contractor, do whatever you can to, obviously for fall protection. But it's good to monitor those situations so that if it does occur, that you can quickly respond to it to mitigate it from getting worse. It's something to look for when it relates to winter storms. So as you're documenting the exterior and interior of your properties, make sure that you look closely at these issues and make sure that you photograph it, obviously document when the losses occurred, and et cetera, et cetera. So collect pertinent financial documents, really more for the business owners here, making sure that you have a solid 3-year look back, broken down monthly. we're having power issues, access to documents, sometimes when these surges occur, you can corrupt hard drives. Go ahead and obtain that information, or retain it, whether in hardcore form or put it on a thumb drive or put it in the cloud for access later. Really, really important that you have access to that stuff as you go to make your claim for loss of income. Again, the whole idea of insurance is to protect your financial bottom line here. So you don't want to be dipping into reserves and further stressing yourself, either personal or your business, or even your community association, which will simply result in obviously special assessments. Some other financial information that you might want are your rolling expenses. I can't tell you how many times that a small, what was claimed to be an insignificant expense at Home Depot ended up opening up really a much larger issue of something that was going on that either a building engineer or an on-site maintenance guy was kind of just looking over or brushing past. And we go back and we find that, $10 can of, fix the roof, the tar substance that sometimes you see people kind of pour over an open area. And so it's important though, because let's say that roof collapses later on, or further deterioration occurs where the roof, starts to, a huge deluge of water pours into the property at some point. You go back and you say, well, I thought I had a minimal roof issue and it was fixed by this $10 can of Fix-A-Roof, but now I have a much larger issue. And you can pinpoint the fact that you tried your best to mitigate the issue by doing that. So next thing you know, that $10 receipt from Home Depot becomes an extremely important part of your actual claim, which is now not $10, is hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's very important that you track those expenses, as well as another financial tip is tracking hourlies. A lot of times people will obviously have the hourlies of their employees as a business owner or a property manager, but they fail to actually track their own time invested in managing and dealing with a claim, where their business function was not that. Your business function was obviously running the business or selling something or managing the property, not managing a claim. That expense is part of your claim to your insurance company. And what's important to note is your hourlies, how many times, what the day is, who is it. Make sure it's consistent also with their contract, with what their hourly actually is. If they're entitled to certain overtime, increased compensation, make sure that's properly noted, but also make sure that you're actually following the contract. Sometimes we do get some records where they basically generally state and give it the overtime hour, but when we actually break it down, we realize that it was only a few hours of overtime. So just really make sure that the documentation is obviously accurate. It's really, really important to doing those things. Another thing that we see, especially with storm claims, deductibles, deductible phobia. Don't let it get you. Deductible phobia is thinking your deductible is either too big or that your amount of your damages is not enough, okay? And I say those things separately because a lot of people, a lot of times when people think their deductible is too big, they don't spend the time to actually quantify what their damages are. And then those that quantify their damages think that that's all it is, and then they decide not to file a claim because they don't think they have enough damage. Because while it's in excess of their deductible, it's just not enough. The reality is that sometimes when we get back in there and we start doing an investigation into things, or like the example with regards to the roof, $10 fix turns into a $100,000 replacement of a roof. These things can escalate, and that prompt notice that you give to your insurance company is very important. Which brings me to my next point, which is immediate notice versus prompt notice. I even tripped up on it. A lot of people get confused with it, they're thinking that they need to give immediate notice to their insurance company. The reality is that you have an obligation to provide prompt notice. And all the things I'm saying here today really shed light on why that's important, is that you may not immediately know that you even have damage, or that you have damages that warrant making a claim or that are recoverable under your policy. So the idea though is that you can still give notice, prompt notice. Prompt notice can be a week, 2 weeks, sometimes it's a year or 2 years down the road of your loss. The insurance companies may argue prejudice, but if you've documented things in a way that clearly shows what the issues are, give them an opportunity to inspect, do all these things, there's really no area for prejudice. So, and so it's important that you give that prompt notice when you're aware of a situation that may warrant a claim, that there's coverage and that there's that you believe that you have a claim that is covered by the policy and that they owe you money for. It's important that you give that prompt notice. But again, going back to my earlier comments about the type of notice you give, again, you have damage. Don't try to leave the adjectives at the door when you're having that conversation, you're making the reporting. It's really important that you do those things. Lastly, as it relates to some of the tips that we have here is contractor invoicing and proposals. Make sure that you're looking closely at these things. There's a tendency by a lot of contractors, especially in the mitigation industry, to give you their boilerplate template contract, and on there are check boxes for things they're going to do. It's the first issue I want to address. A lot of times these contractors, especially in these high stress environments where resources and labor are limited, they're going to sell you into the idea that you check all the boxes. Mitigation, recovery efforts, rebuilding, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All right? But the reality of it is that if your policy only obligates you to mitigate, and if your insurance company can claim prejudice if you cover up the damages or don't give them the opportunity to inspect and everything else, you can't immediately start rebuilding anyways. So you really should partition their work and make sure that contracts are separate, one for mitigation and another one for rebuilding. And it should be quoted the same way. And the why you should do that is because, again, you need to mitigate, stop, recover the money you're entitled to, and then rebuild. Really, really important. If you sign a contract that entitles them to mitigate and then rebuild, especially in a high stress environment like this, your contractor is going to push you to rebuild. Why? Because they want to get paid and they want to move on to the next job. And when you have scarcity of materials and potentially labor, they may not be rebuilding you and restoring you to your pre-loss condition. They're going to, what's famously known in the construction industry, value engineer your job, which means that you're not going to get 100% of the indemnity you're entitled to, and you're going to get a lesser property than you had before the loss. And consequently, though, the insurance company is going to argue that they don't owe you any more money in order to fix the issues or the value engineering job they did because you approved it, signed the contract, et cetera, whatever. Brings me to my second point, which we're related to contractor proposal invoices. Look for these issues on assignment of benefits. A lot of people have this tendency to say, oh my God, I don't want to deal with this. My contractor will do it for me. I'm here to say to you, not a good idea. Just look at the recent Florida legislation and all the things that were used to lobby for the changes that we saw here in Florida. Texas has some similar legislation regarding contractors and potential conflicts of interest. They are not your adjuster. They do not adjust claims. They care more about getting paid than they do coverage. If you assign your benefit over them, they are going to essentially step into the shoes of the policyholder and deal directly with your insurance company. But again, their interest is in getting paid. I'm a licensed general contractor. I understand when you get onto a job as a contractor, you're looking for your next pay rec, meaning your requisition. You want to get paid. You want to see when you're going to get paid. So you build your milestones around getting paid. It's not to mean that you're going to try to take advantage of anyone. Some do, though. And to protect you from those people that want to take advantage of the situation, it's a good idea to strike that part of the contract out. I obviously encourage everyone to get proper legal advice, have an attorney review it, especially if you're on an association board, whether it's a homeowner association or a high-rise condominium property or a co-op, whatever it may be. Make sure that you consult with your attorney to make sure that everything in there is legal, is on the up and up, and it protects your unit owner's interest. And I can't stress that enough. And as a business owner, make sure you're protecting your business. We see a lot of times that business owners just really want to get back to business and want to open. So they do a lot of things and just get contractors in there. Next thing you know, the contractor's there for months fixing things. And you don't even know what he's even doing or she's doing. So it's really important that you have control set around it. That's why it's kind of a good idea, going back to the first point, let's separate the tasks that they're doing. Let's make sure we have itemized estimates and breakdowns of all these things that need to get done. Really, really important. So let's pay attention to these things. Let's make sure that you're getting this documentation. Let's make sure as policyholders you're taking your own photographs. Don't rely on other people to do those things for you. Again, you know the condition of the property before the storm. So when you're taking pictures, you're going to know immediately what you should be taking a picture of, or versus what was there before or after. If there's any sort of lack of maintenance issues, stuff like that, you're going to be the immediate source for that information. So really good idea. Make sure you take the pictures. Make sure you document things. Make sure you collect information from your contractors when you're reporting things. Let's try to lose the adjectives. Let's get straight to the point and do it. And bring my last point. If you are a business owner or you are a community association, hire professionals to represent your interest. This isn't just some slushy sales pitch. This is about money, protecting your financial interests. You hire engineers and contractors and lawyers and accountants all the time to protect your interest or to investigate things because you acknowledge that you don't know those things. You're not an expert, right? You may know something about it, but you're not the expert. When it comes to insurance, you see a lot of policyholders rely on their insurance company to do the right thing. And you rely on your contractor who's there to do construction, not insurance. And you rely on your broker who's not there to adjust a claim but sell you a product. And you rely on your attorney who's there to litigate matters and look at contract issues for you, but again, not there to adjust a claim, to protect your interest when dealing with the insurance company's adjuster, not your adjuster. So the people that come out for the insurance company that get assigned to your claim are for your insurance company. So at that moment that you show up at the property or your contractor's there in your stead because you've assigned all your benefits over to them, you've checked every single box on there. Again, whose interests are they protecting? Your contractor wants to get paid for doing work, so they want to rush through the job. Your insurance company makes more money by paying you less because that's their loss, right? And your attorney, they don't adjust claims, so while they may be able to read your insurance contract, it may not be what they specialize in, and quite frankly, they never actually adjusted a claim, so they don't understand what the process is to adjust, so on and so forth. So you get the point. Licensed public adjusters represent your interests at the onset of a loss, and statistically, if you look at some of the reports that are out there, can recover more than 500 to 700% more than if you do it yourself. The Value Penguin report, which we've mentioned in prior broadcasts, shows that over 68% of policyholders are reporting issues with claim settlements. So if 68% of people are reporting issues with claim settlements in 2020 and years prior, and reports are showing that a public adjuster at the onset of a loss, as opposed to those that don't hire one at the onset of a loss, can recover you 500 to 700% more, then why do you think you can do what licensed public adjusters do better? It just doesn't make sense. And we're talking about public adjusters. We're not talking about attorneys or contractors. In fact, there's laws around contractors not being public adjusters and the conflicts of interest and the unlicensing practice of adjusting, etc. So it's really important that you make sure that you have the people protecting your interests there on day one. Call us first. I want to thank all of our attendees for tuning in today. It was an awesome broadcast. I enjoyed sharing this information with you. We want to continue to bring this valuable information to you as policyholders, your business owner, community association, board member, property manager, or even your homeowners. We want to make sure that you have the information you can use. So to make sure that you have the most relevant information on a weekly basis, we are here live. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, go on our Facebook, follow us, like us on all the social media platforms, because we not only go live every week, we are constantly putting out videos, constantly putting out our newsletters and information that you can use as policyholders to protect your interests. So I want to encourage you all to tune in, obviously, to our live broadcasts that we do on a weekly basis, but I want to make sure that you have all the information you need as a policyholder to make sure that you protect your business, you're protecting your community, and most importantly, protecting yourself and your finances as when you're dealing with whether it's real estate and insurance. We are your source for insurance news you can use. Make sure you tune in next week on Recovery Report Live. We're going to continue our interviews and segments to help all you as policyholder get the information you need to protect your interest. Thanks again for tuning in this week on the Recovery Report Live.